Welcome back to Logic Basics. Last time we went over the basics of a categorical syllogism. We talked about the three terms used in a categorical syllogism: the subject term, the predicate term, the middle term. And now I want to talk about mood, the mood of an argument. The mood of an argument, a categorical syllogism. I'm going to just show you the rules we're going to use, and then we're going to split them in half. Okay, so the following are rules of validity for the well-formed categorical syllogism. Notice there's some that are not well-formed, and there are some that are. That's what we're going to test for. First is there can be no overextension of the S or P term from premise to conclusion. What that means is that when we distribute those little u's and little p's, we can't go from a particular S term or P term in the premise to a universal S term or P term in the conclusion. I'll show you what that looks like. That's going to be one thing that makes an argument invalid. So that's what overextension means, and there'll be names for them. Illicit major is when it happens from major premise to conclusion, and illicit minor is when it happens from minor premise to conclusion. When it happens when we go from particular to universal. And then the second rule is the M term. The middle term has to be universal at least once. So we have to have a little u next to one of our M terms at least one time. Okay, now these last three rules we're going to do first. This is going to rule out some of those non-well-formed syllogism. We can just get rid of them right away if we do 3, 4, and 5 first. So two negative premises yields no conclusion. So the negative premises are anything that's an E or an O. So if we have an E and an O in a premise, we're not going to have a valid argument, and the conclusion is going to not follow logically. So we can rule out the two negative premises. Two affirmative premises yield an affirmative conclusion. So if we have an A and an A, or an A and an I, or an I and an I, we're going to have an affirmative conclusion when we have two. A negative premise yields a negative conclusion. So if we have an E or an O in a premise, then we have to have an E or an O in the conclusion. And then a particular premise requires a particular conclusion. So remember, I and O are particular. So if we have an I or an O in the premise, then we have to have an I or an O in the conclusion. And I'll show you how this works. And then lastly, two particular premises yields no conclusions. So if we have an I and an I, an O and an O, an I and an O, there won't be any conclusion. There won't be any valid well-formed syllogisms with those premises. Okay, I'll show you what this looks like. Here's a little reminder. The predicate term of an A and an I are always particular. So the P term of A and I are P's, little p's. For E and O, it's always universal. So the predicate, the predicate term of E and O is universal. So these are the little u's and little p's. The mood of a syllogism. Here's what I want to talk about now. The mood of the syllogism is the particular combination of its premises and conclusions, A, E, I, and O. Of the 16 possible moods, only 8 are possible in certain figures by these rules. So let me show you what that means. I'm going to go to the iPad, and I'm going to ask you to take out some paper and do this at home. We're going to figure out, applying rules 2 through 5, which are not well formed. We'll see that there are 8 of these that we can get possible well formed arguments from. So let me just show you. On your paper, do this. We're going to say, you know what, I want to use black for this. We're going to put the combinations together between, and actually want to do one more thing. I want to show you that this represents major premise. This represents minor premise. And this represents conclusion. All right. So we're going to see what are the possible combinations between A, E, I, and O premises, and what conclusion would we get from them applying those rules. So let's make a chart, and the chart's going to have 4 A statements, and then 4 E, and then 4 I's, I, and then 4 O's. I'm going to run out of space here, huh? Okay, and then we're going to go A, E, I, O. A, E, I, O. A, E, I, O. And one more time, A, E, I, O. Okay, so these represent syllogisms. Maybe if I do one more thing, I'm going to separate these out so that you can see it's like a chart. And these are premises. They don't have any specifics yet because we're going to have to put the specifics in. So imagine, let me get a different color for this part. Imagine this grouping, AAA. Oops, I'm sorry, AA. I gave it away. We need to get a conclusion. So what this is like this. AAA is like our all men are mortal. Socrates is immortal. What kind of conclusion do you get from that? All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Socrates is immortal. So we get an A for the conclusion. But I'm going to draw your attention to the rules again. Let's look at just these rules. 2 negative premises yield no conclusion. So let's go back and look at all the negative premises that are 2. So here, let's see, we're good there. Here, E, those are 2 negative premises. So there's no conclusion for 2 negatives. So we're going to get rid of that one. We don't even have to go further. There's never going to be a valid argument form that's E. EO, here again, this one is 2 negative premises. E is no, S is P, O is some, S is not P. So those were both negatives. We're going to give it no conclusion. And over here, OO, no conclusion. OE, no conclusion. So notice we've eliminated 4 now. Let's go back to our rules and let's read the rest of this. Where's the other one that says no? 2 particular premises yields no conclusion. So let's go and look for the 2 particulars. Can you see them? I'm going to wait and let you look. Is this? No. That? No. That? No. 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 Uh-oh. Right here. I. Those are both particulars. That's no conclusion. And IO. That's 2 particulars. That yields no conclusion. Oh, over here too. OI, no conclusion. So now how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Now I want to go back to the rules and let's read this one. 2 affirmative premises yields an affirmative conclusion. A negative premise yields a negative conclusion. A particular premise requires a particular conclusion, and we've already ruled out the others. So let's go back and fill out the rest of these. So how do you figure this out? How do I know how to assess this? So if you remember, I showed you, let's just do A for a second. No, actually, let's do all of them. I'll remind you. We did this. All S is P. No S is P. Some S is P. Some S is not P. And then we assign the little u's and p's. So A is UP, E is UU, I is PP, O is PU. It stinks, right? So when I'm looking at this A statement, it represents this, okay? It's just standing in for that. So I could do it like this. all S is P, all S is P. And now what's my conclusion? Okay, it really won't look like this because we have a middle term, so we have another term we have to get in there. That will be what the figure's about. All right, so two affirmatives yields an affirmative. I believe that's what the two affirmative premises yields an affirmative conclusion. So here we have a universal affirmative and a universal affirmative. So we have two affirmatives, so we're going to have an affirmative conclusion. And it doesn't say anything about two universals, but we can infer two universals yields a universal conclusion. So a universal affirmative is A. Okay, that's how we get that. Let's do this one. This is a universal affirmative, and E is a universal negative. I should probably put this over here so you remember. A is universal affirmative, E is universal negative, I is particular affirmative, O is particular negative. Okay, so our rules say a negative premise yields a negative conclusion. So we can infer that this is going to be a negative because here's a negative. And we again have two universals, so let's infer it's a universal. What's a universal negative? That's an E statement, right? Again, universal affirmative. Now we have a particular affirmative. Two affirmatives is going to yield an affirmative, and a particular is going to yield a particular. So we have a particular affirmative here. What's that? I. And I'm just getting that from here, okay? This is what I'm looking at. All right, now, I'd really love to set you free to do all these, but I don't think we could do the next exercise without me doing all of them, because we're going to have to make a list of the valid argument forms. All right, so let's just do these together. This is a universal affirmative. This is a particular negative. So a negative leads to a negative, and a particular leads to a particular. So this is O. All right, I'm just going to keep going with these. E is a universal negative. A is a universal affirmative. So we're going to have a negative conclusion and a universal conclusion, which is E. Okay, this one we're going to put a little, this is a tricky one, but I'm going to show you it anyway. E is a universal negative. I is a particular affirmative. Negative beats out affirmative. Particular beats out universal. So it's a particular negative, which is O. Okay, let's just keep our eyes on that little arrow, because that's going to be, I guess you can't see my arrow. That's going to be a tricky one right there. You know what? It's tricky. It's involving some O's, right? All right, let's just finish this up. Particular affirmative, universal affirmative. So we're going to have an affirmative. Two affirmatives yields an affirmative. And then this is a particular, beats out universal. So a particular affirmative is I. And then, let's see. I actually may have just pointed out the wrong one, that arrow. But let's do this one. I think this may be the messed up one. I is particular affirmative, E is universal negative, so negative beats out the affirmative and the particular beats out the universal, and that's going to be O. I change my mind. I reserve the right to change my mind. This one is the problematic one, but notice it's very similar. It's just the I and the O are flipped. And then we have one more here to do. This is, the O is a particular negative. A is a universal affirmative. You know the drill. Negative beats out the affirmative. Particular beats out the universal. So this is a particular negative, which is O. All right. Now, at the beginning, we said that there were 8 out of these. 8 valid argument forms. But right now, let's number these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. What's up with this one? It looks like we get a conclusion. I'm going to use this argument probably in the next segment to show you how to test for validity. That every time you combine I, E, O, it will lead to, let's just say all 4 figures of I, E, O are invalid. All right, so there's not a well-formed argument using I, E, O. And I'll use this to show you that. We have to do one more thing though. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 possible well-formed categories of categorical syllogisms. There will be 32 possibilities from these 8 because there's 4 different ways of arranging the M term in a syllogism, the middle term. So next we have to learn about figures. And the figure will show us how to set up an argument. So these are standing for statements like this, but we need to know, well, I have a third term, I have a middle term, where do I put it? So we're going to take this. In fact, you know what? I will just make it nice and neat for the next episode. I'll make a list of all the ones we're going to go through, and I am going to give you some to do on your own. I'm not going to do every single one of them, but we're going to put these together with figures next, okay? So that'll be the next video, and I hope this wasn't too confusing. You can go on YouTube and look up categorical syllogisms moods and find other professors doing them. I kind of think they're all the same. Also look in the Peter Kraft book. He has a whole section on this. You could look it up, and if not, just keep watching this video until it clicks. All right, figures next time.